Yo, apparently this guy must give an intro. Give an intro. You can give an intro for me. Okay, fellow netizens. We call them fellow netizens, right? Due to overwhelming response, I'm back again with another download of my series of talks. Talks is known as English versus Manglish. Okay, what is Manglish? Manglish is also known as the Malaysian English or Malaysian English, where here I'm trying to explain as to why Manglish kind of sorry, the Manglish actually evolved. That it is a theory of evolution based on Charles Darwin theory of the evolution of languages. And the language actually was evolved from the language that was inculcated to us by our colonial masters, and that is none other than these British guys, right? The guys who spoke British. Now, I will start the program by first taking, I normally start with my roots, okay? My roots, this is Roots by Frankie Jalleh, not like Alex Haley's Roots. I wasn't adopted from an African village and sold into the slave trade. I was basically, it was on the contrary, I was born in the island of Penang. And I was born during the occupation, the British occupation. That is I was born in 1953. Remember, the British were in Penang, or rather they were in Malaysia. They were in the Strait settlements right up to 1957, when Malaysia got its independence from them. I think Tunku Abdul Rahman went over there and probably begged them, please stop stealing our rubber and tin and our spices. They stole all the stuff. Rather, they took it from us, right? So, at that time when I was young, I was a toddler. I guess I was a toddler, and I was staying in Penang. It's a place called Green Lane. It's now called Bukit Kelugu or some Malay name, whatever. And we had these British neighbors. Okay, it was these British neighbors. They were surrounded. They were behind. They were beside. They were all around us. And of course, being British colonial masters, they also had their children. And I remember my British neighbors, the children always would come over and throw the ball over the fence. We were all separated by fences, so they'll throw the ball over the fence, and then they'll say, Frank, could you please pass the ball back to us? And I would say, you go take the ball yourself, you think what? I think what? I'm your slave, huh? Just because you're Masale, you're white, you think you're no way. You go take the ball yourself, but they have to walk right into our gate and take the balls back themselves. I remember my mom screaming at me, saying, Frank, speak proper English and don't be rude. Don't be rude to our British neighbors. And she's profusely apologizing to the neighbors' children's parents for my behavior. And I said, why do you want to apologize to them? They are the ones who are stealing from us. Who says that? I don't know that's what the locals say. The local grown-ups say. The British are here basically just to take from us, take our tin rubber and whatever, and then we have nothing. Well, the story is like this, lah. At that time, Penang Island was under British rule, and Sir Francis Light was the first governor. And my dad, being a mixed, I would say pseudo-white, Eurasian, Serani. It means we are mixed with white and whatever, lah. So they are pseudo-whites. So my dad named me after Francis Light. I mean the first name, not the light part. I think more Francis, and the other name Clifford was the other guy, the guy who was the governor of the Strait settlement. So my dad named me Francis after Francis Light. He claimed that his grandfather worked as a scribe for Sir Francis Light on his ship. He also claimed that his grandfather was related to Francis Light, who was related. You remember, Sir Francis Light was himself related to King George the Sixth. King George the Sixth. King George is a B and the one that means King George the Sixth. And who is King George the Sixth? He's the father of Queen Elizabeth. Yes, Elizabeth, the present queen now, Queen Elizabeth. So by that token, actually, if my dad's father or my grandfather was related to Francis Light, and if Francis Light was related to King George and King George the Sixth, and King George was the father of the Queen of England now, Queen Elizabeth, by that token, I am actually related to the Queen of England. I am related to the Queen of England. Before, who's shooting me down? It's somebody. I think. No. There's a despiser. Oh, yeah. They don't believe me. Despiser. Yeah. No. Wait. Listen. Actually, it is true. Okay. I'm not gundu here. There's no. Those who say I gundu. Please. I tell you. My dad. He once showed me a letter that King George wrote to my mother offering condolences for the demise of my grandmother's father. My grandfather, I mean, he was offering demise. My grandfather died, and then King George the Sixth wrote to my mother offering his condolences. My dad showed me this letter. It was a letter that was signed by a quill pen, and a pen with those feathers. Okay, so I looked at the letter, and it was actually it was typed. It was typed by one of these ancient typewriters, the clock. And then at the end of the letter, there was a signature with a quill pen. You can see it's a quill pen because it's like it's written, and then it's smudged here and smudged there, and you go fat here and fat. You know, it was written by a pen, and it was written by ink, kind of ink. They dip the pen and the ink, and then they write it. And then he signed off with George the Sixth. So I told my dad, I said, that's not King George. Who is this George the Sixth guy? My dad said, hello, that is King George. He said, that is King George, you idiot. He is King George. I said, no king, he didn't even write King George. He just wrote George. Hey, hello. When King George signed his name, he wouldn't sign as King George. Even his daughter, Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth, I said, you mean to say that King George, this George guy, his daughter is... Yes, he is the father of Queen Elizabeth. George the Sixth something. And he says even Queen Elizabeth, when she signs a name, she doesn't sign that Queen Elizabeth, she just signs Elizabeth. I mean, the thing is that if you are a king, you don't write. Even the Malaysian king won't write his name as King. You won't sign as Duli Yang Maha Mulia Sri Paduka Baginda Yang. That is what other people will call him. So he says this letter is authentic. So he actually did tell me about the history of the island of Penang. The island of Penang was actually ceded to the British, not in 1896, when they said that Francis Light founded the island of Penang. Oh my God, they're closing the shutters down. And when they close the shutters down, it's such a racket. Okay, the British actually, Francis Light founded Penang in 1896, but he said the British actually ceded, the Sultan of Kedah ceded the island of Penang to the British in 1786. That is 16th century story. It was then that our country actually the island of Penang was actually owned by Thailand. This is another long story. Okay, the story. I don't want to dwell into the story because it's something to do with history. You can check it in the history books. The 4 northern states or something were belonged to Thailand, and then it was ceded to Malaya at the time, and they had to pay some tribute to them every year or something in a form of golden flowers. That they call it bunga mas. You can read that on the history books, but whatever my dad says, it's true. It was owned by Thailand, and then the Sultan of Kedah was probably a Thai or whatever, and then. But because of the change of the border, they became Malaysian. I mean, it's only a border change only. Okay? So the story goes say that the Sultan of Kedah ceded the island of Penang to the British in 1786. That was, you can check this date. These dates are correct. When my dad tells me historical facts, it is facts that they lived through. You see, like for me, if you ask me to name all the prime ministers of Malaysia, I can name them one by one because I was ruled by them. I was alive when they were prime ministers. So the young boys now have to study history books to learn this, and I lived through it, so I don't have to learn. So basically, it's history that I can narrate. You know how Alex Haley, when he went back to his homeland in Africa, there was one guy who could relate his entire family chain by heart because he was the oldest man there, and he lived through all these people that were his ancestors. So for a while, I actually my dad was quite involved in British stuff. He was more involved in British. Although he was in music, but he was involved in British. I actually worked. I worked for a while in Radio Malaysia. Now, Radio Malaysia is when later on my dad moved to KL. I worked in Radio Malaysia. This is in Angkasa Puri. You know, you see the Angkasa the main building, and then there's a building beside it. That's Radio Malaysia. I was there. They actually moved from Federal House PJ. I remember, and then Radio Malaysia, and I was working there and recording the story about the 7 Ampat Sekawan. The Ampat Sekawan, the recordings were all done there, and we had another thing called the radio theatre, where the same thing, they will all gather around this condenser mic, and we will all do we will have our scripts. But as I said, the Ampat Sekawan, no scripts. they did it off the cuff. But we, radio theatre, we had scripts, so we just gathered around the mic, and we did this BBC radio theatre, radio plays written by British. You know, the British, they had quite a number of British people still there writing plays. Ridwan, Chesterfield, there was another old guy. Many of them didn't go back to Penang. They married local ladies, and they were into writing scripts after late 70s. And we used to take part in the scripts and take part in this radio theatre shows. And that was the early days, you know, before TV, before the advent of TV had radio. It was only later on the TV station, Angkasa Puri, that huge building that looks like tongues hanging out from the front. Somebody described it as a tongue building. Thought it looks like a bit of the Maori tongues in New Zealand, where they stick their tongue out when they do their dances. And so this Angkasa Puri building, those days, was the first station place where we had this TV being broadcasted. Okay, and I remember the earlier newscasters started off with a good friend of mine, Bosco de Cruz, the late Bosco de Cruz. He actually sounded exactly like this guy called Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Now, if you never heard of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, he is the guy who wrote the famous Sherlock Holmes series. The couple of British detectives. One is Watson, and the other guy is Sherlock Holmes. And it was very interesting to note that we had in fact, in radio, in the radio complex, that's next to the Angkasa Puri building, we had a library full of plays by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and this was all in vinyl records. You remember vinyl records? You put the record on the turntable. You take something that resembles a needle. This is after the gramophone. You put a needle and then you play. And actually, the funny thing is that at that time we had a librarian at the radio building, and his name was Inche Konondola. So we found it uncanny. His name's Konondola, and he kept this library of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's vinyl records. It was a strange coincidence that the names Konondola and Doyle sounds the same. Later on, when this Conan the Barbarian, this movie Conan the Barbarian that was later made his debut, we named this guy Conan the Librarian, something like Conan the Barbarian became Conan the Librarian. So it was, I think, better laugh here. Clap as well. Okay, I also noticed that the advent of TV brought about many advertisements in Bahasa Malaysia that sounded British. It said at one stage there was a ruling that all signboards in Malaysia, all signboards that adorn the front facade of any shopping shops in Kuala Lumpur, whatever, they need to have Bahasa Malaysia as the main language. That was the national language policy then. So apparently this ruling began to be applied to television commercials. So and at one stage there seemed to be that only one person was doing all the voiceover talent for TV commercials in radio, TV, whatever. And this guy was a small, very short. I know him now. Okay, Patrick Teo. Everybody would know that he did 99% of all TV commercials in those days, in the 70s, in the 80s, and when it became compulsory for them to do commercials in Bahasa Malaysia, there were no guys who could do it in Bahasa Malaysia. Then later on there was people who came into the so people like Patrick Teo, they had to do commercials in Bahasa Malaysia. So I remember that whenever they did commercials, they sounded very British. The Bahasa Malaysia became Manglish, British sounding. It's like I remember one he did the Patrick Teo, Dorina Margarine Baru. It was sound Dorina Margarine. So I thought that it sounded very British, because Dorina, of course, is a British word, margarine is a word, but then Baru was a Malay word, but it sounded more British than anything else. And then there was also another insect repellent called Raid. Nowadays it's called shell toxin. Those days it's called Raid. So I remember the cartoon version of that insect repellent, and they had the mosquitoes were rendered into cartoon characters, and they flew away when somebody pumped the Raid at them. So they flew and they escaped into this. They escaped into the walls. Actually, the walls were like partition walls. So they hid in the partition of the walls, and then they spoke. The mosquitoes, the cartoon character of the mosquito spoke in a strangely enough in a very British accent. Ray tak boleh masuk dalam dinding. And I thought it was strange. It was funny because apparently it was. I don't think it was Patrick Teo. I think it's probably one of those British guys in RTM. That was paid to do the commercials, and he sounded very, very British, and it was strange, but we as kids at that time, I was not involved so much. We were kids, so we kind of like imitated them. Ray tabuli masuk dalam dinding. You know, we tried. They had even a bow tea commercial was done. It was inilah bow, inilah something teh bow. Bow, B-O-H is spelled as B-O-H, right? And then bukan bib, bukan bob, bukan flip, bukan flop, bukan McWiffle, bukan McWaffle, bukan McWaffle, whatever. I don't know. I can't remember what it was. Bukan McWiffle, bukan McWaffle, bukan Mac whatever. But it said bukan. And then itulah bow. B-O spelled as B-O-W, and then they changed it to bow. And I think that was also done by a British guy. And we found that it was actually what I would consider my version of Manglish as far as newscasters. Even newscasters, we had a newscaster for each one of each language, for English, for Mandarin, for Bahasa Malaysia, and for Tamil. But unfortunately, the English newscaster had trouble when they came with pronouncing the names of places in Bahasa Malaysia. For example, I remember the late Robert Lam, who says, Malaysians today celebrated Taipu Sam at the Batu Caves in Kuala Lumpur. So it was, once they spoke the English words, is okay, but once they came to Bahasa Malaysia, the words are supposed to be spoken in the way that you speak Bahasa Malaysia, but it wasn't. And then there was another way around. There was also a Bahasa Malaysian newsreaders who sounded more British. I remember a guy called Farid Ismet. He's also dead and gone. I mean, he's also demised recently. He passed away. Sad to say, a close friend of mine. And he sounded more British than Malay. I remember he did one ad commercial. He did it. This is the style, quality, excellence, Dunhill commercial. He did it, the Malay version of it, and he says, Gaya, Mutu, Keunggulan, Dunhill. So his voice was more like very airy, and I thought it sounded a bit British, if not mistaken. I asked him, in fact, he's a close friend of mine. I asked him why he did it such a British style. He says, yeah, the advertisers do not want the word Mutu to sound like a name of an Indian guy, Mutu. So it's Mutu, Keunggulan, Dunhill. He had his airy, very breathy voice. So at this moment time, I think it's getting a bit late. I have to sign off now. So this is Frankie Jalleh signing off. In the meantime, look down. Okay, you see my subscribe. There's the word subscribe there at the bottom. Just press it, and it will turn from red to gray. Okay, that means you have subscribed to my channel, and you're going to support me for all these talks that I'm doing on Manglish. Okay, so this is Frank Jalleh, in the words of, let's see now, Patrick Joe. He used to say, like, here's Patrick Joe wishing you blue skies. Okay, here's Frankie Jalleh wishing you blue skies and nice things. Okay, and hope that we can break this COVID chain. Okay, so bye for now. Bye.